Hello everybody, and welcome to the webinar on tender finalization. My name is Brindley Webster. I'm a technical consultant here at the CCS offices in Centurion. It is my pleasure to present this webinar to you. Today we'll be looking at tender finalizations. We will firstly try to understand the basics of a tender finalization. I will then run you through the process of tender finalization in Candy. Due to the large number of people logged into this webinar, we will not be able to answer any questions during the webinar. However, please submit your questions during the session with the provided function on screen. At the end of the webinar, we will collate these questions and send out the answers to everybody that registered for this webinar via email. Please note that the webinar will be recorded. You will receive a link to download it. There's a webinar once a month on various Candy topics. Should you not be able to attend the webinar at the given time frame, then please still register and the webinar will be sent to you and you also may download it. Let's get started. The agenda for this webinar will be as follows. We will look at what is a tender finalization. Why is a tender finalization necessary? We'll then look at the benefits of a tender finalization. We'll then look at the tender finalization process within Candy. Firstly, we will price the tender. We will to establish our net rates. We will then apply markup to get our gross rates and gross amounts. Once we've done that, we will do a quick recap in understanding the difference between the net versus the gross versus the selling rate. We will then price our PNG, which is our indirect pricing. We'll have a look at some reports based on the tender that we've priced. And lastly, we will look at the tender finalization in Candy. So what is a tender finalization? It is the process of completion or approval of the tender procedure. Many companies have procedures, and basically before you submit a tender or finalize a tender, these procedures all need to be fulfilled, and the tender finalization is the completion of all of those processes. So all aspects of the tender are looked at in detail. So people take the time out to study the tender in order to get all the specific details. All the relevant role players are present in this meeting or discussion. So firstly, it'll be the estimator. It will also comprise of the site team and maybe possibly the general manager of the business. So all issues are identified and dealt with accordingly. So after everyone has done their homework studying the tender, at the finalization meeting, it all gets put on the table and resolutions come up for any issues. So why is a tender finalization necessary? It's to understand the job or the contract being tendered on, which is the overview. To understand the intricacies of the tender, the conditions of contracts, the timing of the tender, the program, the current market, so obviously any competition, who is the professional team, what are the requirements of the contractor, might be PNG requirements or capital requirements. Any risks are identified and dealt with. And lastly, the markup gets decided on. So many companies have their own tender overview templates or tender finalization templates. And they would look something like this. They would cover the overview. So it would be the job name, the scope of the work, the location, who the employer is, the closing dates and closing time. These are important for you to understand. As you all know, when a tender is closing on a certain date at a certain time, you can't be a minute late. And we also need to understand where it's closing. I would next look at number 2, which is your contract conditions. So what is the type of contract? Is it a JBCC, SABS, or COLSO, etc.? What are the contract specifications? What is the system of measurement? What are the payment terms? Very important. Who effects the insurance? Are there any guarantees required? Is escalation applicable on this job, or is it a fixed contract? And another important one is penalties. What are the penalties per day, per month, whatever it may be? Number 3 would be the program. So it would be, when is this contract starting? When is it ending? What is the duration? And are there any sectional handovers? So a contractor can see if they will have the resources in order to do this tender, obviously bearing in mind the current work that they are busy with. The next part of their template would be competition. So who am I tendering against? Are they desperate for work? Are we desperate for work? And it gives you a nice idea of what the markets are at present. You would then look at the professional team, who's the principal agents, architects, PQS, health and safety. Have I worked with any of these professionals before? And just gives you an idea of how smoothly the project would go. They would then also have risk. So they would look at topics like, is there any labor unrest in the area? Are there any specific financial requirements? Is there water and lights on site? What are the environmental risks? And what is the tender functionality? So they look at that to see if they're wasting their time in tendering on this job because they will not meet the minimum functionality of the job or not. So all this can get done in Candy. And the nice thing about it is that it all gets done in one program. Anyone that is busy working on this tender will have access to this. This can be backed up. It can be printed and could also be part of your finalization pack. So I'm going to take you into Candy just to show you where to find this and the information that you can populate. As I covered already, you can see you've got the tender title, the reference number, the closing date, the description, tender description. So it's the construction of a multi-story office park, including a guardhouse and all services. The location, it's in 25 September Street in Irene. Who's the contracts manager and the supervisor? We aren't sure, so we still need to announce that. Who's the client? It's Smart Pty Limited. The engineers or the architects are Goodson Engineers. The quantity surveyors are Measure QS. And the approximate value is about 22 million. The contract period is about 24 months. What are the retention conditions? So it's as per the JBCC Principal Building Agreement Edition 5, July 2007. The conditions are as per the JBCC. Specifications are as per the ASAQS Model Preambles of Trade, the 2008 edition. The measurements are as per the Standard System of Measuring Building Work, the 7th edition. The guarantees are, there's an insurance guarantee required, which is a 10% variable. And you have insurances which are to be effected by the main contractor. And then you can add any general notes to this. So let's go and find in Candy where we can input this information. Okay, so there's our tender, the Smart Office Park tender. I'm going to go into this job. So if you're looking for your estimate details, you click on main, go down to estimate details, and here we find the estimate details where we can put all this information in. This can be printed, as I mentioned earlier, and it also can be part of your finalization pack. Okay, back to Candy. Back to the presentation. What are the benefits of a tender finalization. So firstly, all the role players are aware of what the project entails. All risk is identified and measures are put in place to mitigate this risk. The opinions and experience of all role players is considered, which is quite important. And then all the relevant or different construction methods are considered to make the bid more competitive. So that's the reason why you have all these people with all the experience. They look at the different ways, and based on their experience, they can play around or adjust the way they're going to build. Next is the program or the duration of the project gets discussed, and any methods of reducing the program or the duration of the project. Staffing requirements are identified along with the availability of staff. And lastly, the markup percentage gets agreed on. So the tender finalization process in Candy. So we're going to do the following in Candy. We will firstly look at our tender that we have priced to establish our net. We'll then apply markup, understand the difference between the rates in Candy, price our PNGs, look at tender reports, and then the tender finalization in Candy. We will do a trade total display, a confidence check. We'll then look at what's most important here is your finalization top sheets, and then we'll have a look at the Californian envelope, which is quite a nice tool to use in Candy. So pricing our tender. So using first principle pricing, all the bill items will need to be priced. Pricing using worksheets is ideal method because it is priced from first principles using resources. Pricing using plug or split rates is not recommended because it only generates financial information for the job. Candy can be used to its full potential to generate both financial and engineering information. So we're going to go back into Candy and have a look at the tender that we are busy on. So I'll then open up my pricing bill of quantities, and you will see that I have priced this complete tender. So firstly, if you look at the first bill item, my rate for my open phase excavation, I double click on the net rate and you see there is my worksheet. The top half is the variables, the bottom half makes up my calculation. So at the moment you can see that I have selected to use 10 TLBs. My TLBs are able to achieve 4 to 15 cubes an hour, which gives me a rate down below of 97 Rand 43. I also have some labor to assist the TLB. So all my bill items will need to be priced in a similar fashion using a worksheet, using resources in order for us to generate the proper information required for the job. So just to show you that I have priced all the bill items, I will do a filter. And I will do a pricing filter for any unpriced items, including plugs and splits. And you see that there are no items found to match this filter. So all my bill items have been priced fairly accurately. Calculate the job. So the job is currently sitting on 9,115,392 Rand 31. Next, we will need to apply markup to establish our gross. So once the net rate for each bill item has been calculated, markup can now be added to calculate the gross rate. So in Candy, your net rate plus your applied markup equals your gross. As an example, 10 Rand plus 10% markup, which is 1 Rand, gives us a gross of 11 Rand. Same with 9 Rand. So 9 Rand plus 10% gives us 9 Rand 90. And 12 Rand plus 10% works out to a markup of 1 Rand 20, gives us a gross of 13.20. So the gross rate is the calculated rate, and changes made to your net rate or your markup will change your gross rate. So we have different types of markup in Candy, and the types of markup that can be applied are: number one, to mark up all your trades. So all your trades in Candy will get the same markup, or you can mark them up. Do a trade markup where you can give different trades different markups. You can also apply an individual markup. And lastly, the fourth way is resource type risk markup. So we're going to go into Candy and I will show you how to apply all these different types of markup. So we've priced our job using our pricing bull. I will then open up document number 1.6, my markup bull. So we still have our standard BOQ, but now we have columns pertaining to markup. So the column we see here is markup percentage column. You have the markup type. You have your resource risk percent to give us our gross. So at the moment, you can see that our net rate is exactly the same as our gross rate. So we'll now go and apply a markup by marking up all the trades. In the markup percent column, I will right click. I will go down to General Markup Facilities, and this is one of the ways of adding markup. Because we're looking at tender finalization in Candy, I'll show you another way of doing it. So under the estimating tab, there's an option finalization. Click on that. You can go down to markup, and they are the same options as we had when we right-clicked on that markup percent column. So the first markup I'm going to show you is marking up all the trades. And we're going to mark up all the trades by 10%. I'm going to click on OK. It's going to ask you if you to confirm. Click on yes, and it's been completed successfully. Click on OK. So at the moment, there's no markup, but once I click on my document, you see it adds 10%. So 92 Rand 13 plus 10% gives me 101 Rand 34. Now, if I calculate, you can see down here, it's 9 million in my net. I've added 10% to give me my 10 million. So that's marking up all trades. Another way of doing it is to do a trade markup. So number 2, click on finalization, markup, and I click on trade markup. So to make our tender a bit more competitive, let's go and change some of these to make it a bit easier. So firstly, we're not going to add any markup on our PNGs, so we can remove that 10%. Then if you go down to your provisional sums, the provisional sums are not going to get marked up. The markup on the provisional sums has already been catered for, and the profit and attendance on the provisional sums has already been catered for in the bill of quantities. So to make our tender a bit more competitive, I know that my waterproofing has been subcontracted. So all I need to do is manage the subcontractor. So I'm going to change the markup to 5% on my waterproofing subcontractor. And then also my plumbing and drainage, I will change that to 10% to 5% just to make our tender a bit more competitive. I can close my trade markup, click on my tender document. I can now go to my waterproofing, and you can see that there is a 5% markup, but my brickwork has not been changed. so it's specific to the trade. Next, I'd like to show you the individual markup. So my first item under my earthworks is open face excavation in earth over sloping site, open face excavation, and the quantity is 4,757 cubes. So this is quite a big quantity, and I'm not 100% sure that my rate is correct. Or another scenario is because of the high quantity, I want to add a bit of fat because maybe I see this becoming a lot bigger than what it is. In the markup percentage column, I can just delete what is currently there, change it to 20%, hit enter, and then I'll get a message that asks me, am I sure? Click on yes, and you can see in the type column, it's now an individual markup. The next markup I'd like to show you is my resource type risk. So I click on finalization, go to markup and resource type risk. So for this tender, due to the duration of the project, I'd like to allow a bit of risk on this. So I anticipate that the labor price and the material will go up sometime during the duration of the project. So I'd like to add a further buffer. So on my labor, I would like to add 2.5%, and on my materials, 3.5%. Okay, so I'm only adding an additional markup to my labor resource and my material resource. Can close this. So let's go back to our slides just to understand how the resource type risk works. Okay, so the resource type risk calculation is as follows. So the resource type risk is used to add markup to the resource type components of a net rate. For example, you want to mark up the labor content of the net rate by a further 10%. If both trade or individual markup and risk are used, there will be markup on markup. The gross rate is calculated according to the following. So your gross rate equals your net multiplied by 1 plus your risk percent in brackets plus 1 plus your markup percent in brackets. So assume an item has a rate of 100, a 10% trade or individual markup, and an additional 10% resource type risk for labor and none for plant. So the gross rate is calculated as follows. So your net rate equals 50 for labor, 50 for plants to give me 100 Rand. So as I've mentioned before, there'll be nothing on plants. We only want to mark up 10% on the labor, which is your resource type. So your labor risk will be 50 multiplied by 10% to give me 5. And my plant will be 50 multiplied by 0% to give me 0. The 100 and the 5 get added together to give me a subtotal of 105. And then your trade markup gets applied. So my 105 multiplied by 10% gives me 1050. That gets added together to give me a total of 11550. Okay. So the resource type risk is always added to the net rate before applying the tender trade or individual markup. Markup percentage can be a maximum of 8 digits, including 3 decimals. A price code with the resource type risk is identified by a red dot in Candy. These are all the considerations to take into account when using the resource type risk calculation. Now that we've added markup, let's just understand the difference between the nets versus the gross versus the selling. So we are at tender stage at the moment. So the simple calculation is your net plus your applied markup gives you your gross. An example is 10 plus 10% will give me 11. 9 plus 10% will give me 990. 12 plus 10% will give me 1320. Then we end up in the post-tender stage. So your selling minus your net equals your calculated markup. Because we've been awarded the tender, we will then copy our gross to our selling, and we use a term in Candy, we lock that. So your selling becomes your contractual value, contractual amount. That is how much the client is going to pay you. And in a perfect world, he wouldn't pay you more than that. But obviously, due to variation orders and so on, that might change. So we copy that to our selling, subtract our net, which is 10, and it equals that 10% markup, the calculated markup that we added on at tender stage. So there our selling is of 11. If we are able to get the resource, able to do the job cheaper, maybe we get the resource at 9. We are now making 2. So that gives me a percentage of 22.2%. So just because we've made a saving, it doesn't mean that we would go back to the client. He's already agreed to pay us 11, so we wouldn't go and tell him we're able to find our resource cheaper. And it could also go the other way. So the client has agreed us to pay us 11. We weren't able to reach our target of 10. We now have to pay 12, which means we're going to lose 1, which is a negative 8.33%. So the gross rate is a calculated rate, and changes made to the net rate or markup will change the gross rate. The selling rate is locked, and changes made to the net rate will not change the selling rate. The difference between the net rate and the selling rate will calculate the calculated markup. Now we will look at our indirects. So this is our PNGs and how we go about pricing them. So indirect costs are costs not directly included in bill items, non-productive costs or preliminary costs required in the project, i.e. supervision, plant, site services, etc. The indirect bill is a separate schedule of items which can be either time, value, or fixed-based items, and which are managed within Candy for tender, forecast, and post-contract purposes. The indirect cost bill in Candy is a second bill that allows users to price their internal preliminaries / overhead costs, both time and value related, in a pricing document that gives the user optional access to a bar chart to assist in spreading of costs over time. The indirect cost bill can be created in the master job and recovered into the pricing job to simplify and speed up the pricing process. So this is really nice feature in Candy. You're able to manage your PNGs and do a monthly claim against yourself. So you're able to see how much money you will be receiving. So there are 3 methods of indirect cost inputs in Candy. The first way is a time input. So this option limits post-tender control for monthly spreads, and you will see that we do not recommend it. The next method, number 2, is the start and end input. So this option allows for better post-tender information, but is restricted to the monthly entry and control. The best way is to use the bar chart input number 3. So indirects can be spread over the BOQ as specified by the user. So I will show you these 3 ways in Candies. Okay, so we can close our markup bill. You'll then see there's an option under estimating for indirects, and we will open indirect cost documents. So the first way is the time input that I've been through with you. If I open this up, you will see that you have your indirect costs. So I've already priced my complete PNG for this job. My value is 4.6 million. And this is really nice because you have your staff supervision. I have a contracts manager. I have one contracts manager. His factor will be 25%. So he will not be there every single day. He'll be spread 25% on it. And you also see we have a unit rate. So his rate is 58,000. And what's beautiful about this is if I open this, there's a worksheet behind this. So you see how his rate is built up. The next method, which is a bit better, so we don't recommend the time input. This is just if you want to put together a quick PNG with no value behind it. The next best is the start and end months. So here you can see we still have the contracts manager. You're able to put in when he will be starting, when he will finish, and it would calculate his months. So if he was not starting from the get-go on the job from month 1, maybe he starts at month 3, you could put that in, and maybe he does not need to work right through to the end of the actual project. You could also say that he'll finish 2 months earlier. So you'll see that we have everything from the contracts manager down to your site officers, down to your plant establishment, and so on. The best way of doing your indirect costs is by using your bar chart input. Open up that. So there's my contracts manager. You can see his rates. You can see the duration. And you can now see that when he will be starting, so that's his bar. And he's obviously spread over the job for the duration of the project. But he will only be there for 25% of his time. This is really nice. Further down, a good example is your car park and hard standing establishment. So you'll start that on day 1 up until halfway through the 2nd month of the job. And then you will have the removal. And you will see, you know exactly when that would happen. Benefits of the bar chart gives us our monthly spread. So if I open up this document, you can now see the spread of that contracts manager and the money that you will be claiming from the client and hopefully getting paid. So 14,000 there in February for the duration of the project. Okay, so next we need to do some reporting. So we've priced our job, we've added markup, we've priced our PNGs. But remember, we've priced our PNGs, we still need to take that amount and put it onto our BOQ. So let's go back into Candy, indirects, open up my bar charts, calculated, and there's the value 4.6 million. I can size this to the top half of my screen. I then open up my BOQ, and there is my PNG. I can size this to the bottom half of my screen. So you see my PNG is still in at 0. I open that up, and then I can change this amount to exactly what the PNG is. So it's 4,636,942 Rand and 19 cents. I store that. There's my PNG, calculates my contract value is now sitting at 13 million. So now that we've completely priced our tender, we can do some tender reporting. We'll firstly look at our continuous listing net. We'll look at our continuous listing gross, that's including markup. We'll then have a look at our BOQ listing with worksheets. We'll look at our brought forward, carry forward gross, our value analysis 80-20, our resource percentage, our indirect costs bar chart, what we've just been through, and our indirect cost monthly spread. Back into Candy. So the first report we're going to look at, open up the report manager, is my BOQ continuous listing net. Preview this report. There's the PNG that we just put in. So remember, this is net, this is my cost. Okay, there's our rates. This is an internal document. And if I go to the last page, you'll see there is the split of all my trades and the value of my projects. Next report we want to look at is our BOQ continuous listing gross. This is the one that would get submitted through to the client. Preview this, and you'll see that we've added in a Candy logo. So you can add your logo in. This document is editable. So as I said before, we would not be adding any markup onto our PNGs. But if you look at the next page, all these rates now include markup. If I go to my last page, you'll see previously it was 13 million, now it's 14 million because this is including our markup, and we see the split between all the different trades. Next report is our BOQ listing with worksheets. If I preview this document, you will see that it contains every single bill item, but now it contains just below that item the worksheet, so how the rate was actually built up. So this is really nice for chief estimators that need to sign off what their estimators are doing. You can see how the rate is built up, or it's a nice way of your site team managing your job on site, because they understand what, as an example, what resources have been allowed to excavate trenches and so on. Next report. So some clients would want to see a BOQ in a carried forward, brought forward fashion. Preview this document and you see that the amounts are now carried forward and brought forward. So this one, amount 1.1 million would carry, it's carried forward, and there's the brought forward. All that adds up to give me that summary. Next report is my value analysis 80-20. So this is a very nice report because it looks at 20% of the bill items that contain 80% of the value. You would need to customize it, select bill quantity, and we want to look at our direct costs, and you see I've set it to 80%. Click on OK and preview this document. So you see this is 20% of the bill items that contain 80% of the value. So you see the value, firstly it's my PNG, of course. Next would be my provisional sum, And next you see there's 16 millimeter diameter steel bar reinforcement, 7 million. The cumulative is 7 million, the value is 1.1 million, and it makes up 8.64% of the total. And then there's a cumulative column also. So just by looking at 20% of the bill item, I've already checked 80% of my tender. So this is a really valuable report. Next, we have our resource percentage. Again, I'm going to customize it. I want to look at my resource types, simple resources only. Click on OK. My bill quantity, preview the report. And now you see of the resource type, there is the percentage. So a nice example is to look at my materials. So my 30 MPa concrete makes up 36% of its type and 5.41% of the total percentage of the job. Next report is my indirect costs bar chart. Preview this report. And there you see at the top, you have a summary program. So you're able to see when your setup of your site offices are, when your earthworks duration is, but what's more important is down below is seeing your spread of your indirect costs. So there's that contracts manager you see spread across the duration of the project. This is a nice little report that you could maybe print, stick up on your wall so that you know when resources are meant to be on site and meant to be off site. The last report we're going to look at is the indirect costs monthly forecast. So all this is money spread over time. Preview this report, and there you see now the money portion of it. So there's the contracts manager, and you see the money getting spread over the different months. So this is quite a valuable report to have. So now that we've looked at all these reports, we will now look at the tender finalization. So we will now do a trade total, looking at our net and our gross. We'll do a confidence check. We'll do a finalization top sheet, and we will look at an Californian envelope. So this is the process that we suggest you use when using Candy to do a tender finalization. So the trade total display net. So the trade total display shows the trades used in the job vertically down and down the screen, and the resource types horizontally. And remember, these are now all excluding markup. So let's go in and see how we would do that in Candy. So in Candy, we have the pie chart, which is the trade total display. If you click on that, you are able to select the different quantities. We only have a bill quantity. We're going to look at our net rate, and we're going to calculate. So as I said, the trades are vertical. And then our resource types are horizontal. So as an example, earthworks, we see the value is 1,047,000. Of that 1,047,000, 76,000 falls under my labor resource type, and plant falls under 971. So this is a nice way of seeing where the money sits. We'll now look at our trade total display gross. So the gross amounts are shown below for each trade together with the net split amount and the gross minus the net amount difference. So this would be our job including markup. So in Candy, all we would need to do is change our rate to gross and recalculate. So you now see that this is all. So there's my 1.2 million, my marked up earthworks. 76,000 of it. So remember, this is net, so this is not including any markup. And where we see that markup is our gross minus our net difference, 154,000. So we see that that is now the markup just on the earthworks, profits just on the earthworks. So for our job, we are going to be making 694,000. Next, I'd like to show you the percentage. So this can also be viewed as a percentage. Contractors like to see the percentages rather than values. So to change it as it is on the screenshot here in Candy, you would just click on View, Display Values as Percentages. So you can see that for this job, we will be making 4.81% markup. Might be good, might be bad, depends on the industry that you're in and how competitive it is. So the confidence check, so this also forms part of the process of tender finalizations. So a confidence check is done to identify the following. So this is how it looks. Let's go into our job to see where we find this and what it covers. In Candy, once we've done our checks, remember this trade total display can get printed and also included in our tender finalization pack. At the bottom, we have confidence check. So this also needs to get done to make sure that everything is done accurately on the job. So firstly, pricing modes. We have no unpriced items. We have 109 worksheets. We don't have any split rates and we don't have any plug rates. So that's very important. You can also see that our resources, we don't have any that are provisional. We have from our master, X-Master 149. So this is also can be printed and included. Obviously, you want to make sure, most importantly, that you don't have any unpriced plugs or split rates. Now we are going to look at the finalization top sheet in Candy. So just to give you an overview, so the finalization can be done within Candy using the finalization top sheets. You don't need to do this outside of Candy. So the facilities will copy relevant data from your Candy estimate to specified cells on an Excel top sheet template that you have on your computer. So what is the methods? How is it done? So to get your top sheet onto this list, you should contact your local CCS offices. You would need to provide a copy of your Excel top sheet, specify that Candy data is to be copied to which cells on the top sheet. CCS staff will then include your company in the list on this dialog and write a small program to copy the required data to your Excel top sheet. So we provide our clients with a standard template. They are allowed to use it. Any changes that you would like made, you would need to contact your local CCS offices, and this gets done at a small little charge to you. So how does it work? So you issue your top sheet to your user to store on their computers. When using this facility, Candy transfers the specified data to cells in the top sheet. Excel top sheets then recalculates using this Candy data on your formula on your format. So the settings, so your top sheet will be listed in definitions and settings, number 6.4 top sheets, where you'll be required to browse to your top sheet template, which will be stored in your computer, and then select which worksheets to be export the data. So security, so there are no security risks in rivals seeing or using your top sheets. You issue your top sheet templates to your people, and so only they see exactly how and where the Candy data is used. If someone runs your top sheet export on a blank Excel document, they would only see the raw Candy data and not how it applies or where it is used on the top sheet. So we'll now go, I will show you the top sheet. So firstly, it would comprise of your indirect costs. So you see there's your console. I will run you through this in Candy. It then gets broken down into your direct costs, your subcontractor, and your provisional sums to give you a value. We then include some tender adjustments and then also a sign-off. We also have another tab, which is your subcontractor adjudicator summary. So before we look at the Californian envelope, let's look at this process in Candy. So we will now click on finalization. We will go down to top sheet. I will then be required to match my resources. So my provisional sums need to be my provisional sums, subcontract my subcontractors. Click on OK. Now this is going to write to an Excel document. I will select that Excel top sheet, and you now see that it opens up the Excel. So you see the contract name, if there was a contract number, the currency, the base date if you had populated it in Candy, and also you'd see the duration of the project. What's important here is it's broken up into our indirect costs. So our staff makes up that amount, our plant, site offices, and batch plant establishment. We also see the percentages of that amount. Next, you see direct costs. So your own work. So my PNGs, my formwork, my labor, materials, plant, and my profit and attendance. So you're able to see exactly split over your resource types, the values. You'll then see your subcontractors. So my reinforcing, my painting subcontractor, waterproofing, you see their values and the percentages. You'll also see if there are any additions. Gives you a gross total, so that's including your markup, excluding your PNG, percentage, and including. You then see your provisional sums, so the value of your provisional sums. All those headings add up to give me my total. And then we allow for any tender adjustments. So if there's any contract risk that you want to add, if there's any measurement contingency percentage you would like to add, some clients actually want to include their tender costs. So the cost of them pricing this tender, they could include that. If they want to add in any fixed price or escalation percentage, design costs, and company overhead percentages. You then get the sign-off. So once this has been finalized, the estimating manager, the bid leader, so all the relevant people will sign this off. And what's quite important is to see the Candy net total, what has been exported, and then your top sheet net total. So all these values need to be the same. The next tab is your adjudicator. So what's nice about this is you see there's my trade waterproofing, the 2 quotes that I got, and we've used Mr. Waterproofing. You see his value, and you see that waterproofing spec was 5.2% more. So you can see exactly which subcontractors have been used and why. Next, we have the Californian envelope. So just to give you an overview, The Californian envelope is a forecast of what you'll be claiming using your selling amount. The Californian envelope does not take into consideration the cash flow settings such as payment lags, interest rates, advance payments, etc. So this is used as a tender tool at tender stage. If you would like more information, users can attend a course we offer, which is C301, Forecast, Budget and Cash Flow, which covers cash flows in detail. We also have a webinar based on cash flows. So in Candy, how we would do this is by clicking on Finalization. We would then go down to Californian Envelope, click on Californian Envelope, and here we see that there are different types of curves. So firstly, there's a civil curve, a building curve, and a user-defined curve. So we're going to use the building curve. If you remember correctly, the project duration was 24 months, and the value of the job was, if you're not sure about it, remember we have a report, our gross, preview that, go to our last page, and our tender value is 14,447,024.16. So click on Finalizations, Californian Envelope, project is 24 months, and we're looking for the contract value in thousands. So this would be 14,447,000. Click on OK. And now you see it does a Californian envelope for the building curve. There's my contract period, my value. So you see the monthly, there's your months. You have a cumulative in thousands. So there's your lower column, your mean, and your upper. This can all get put onto a diagram. Click on Plot Curve, Preview, and we see the actual curve. So there's your green line. That's your mean, your lower, and your upper. So this curve can obviously be defined by the user. Click on Finalization, Californian Envelope, and if you look at your envelope curve editor, at the moment it's set to building. If you look at the civils curve, it's more of a flat curve. The building is more of an exaggerated S. And then you also have an option to use the user-defined curve. This is where the user would input the time, percent time, lower, mean, and upper. So as I mentioned earlier on, there's the different type of curve that you may select from. Civils curve, building curve, the user curve. So now that we've been through this webinar, you would need to put in place a tender finalization checklist. So number one is the estimate details populated. You would price your bill of quantities using first principles. You would conduct a confidence check to establish if you have any unpriced items, splits, or plugs, as I've mentioned there. And then you would price your indirects. You would apply markup. You would print the Candy Tender Finalization top sheet. You would then do a Californian envelope, which is your tender forecast. You would print your reports, and lastly, you would submit your tender. Thank you for your time, and I trust that you have a greater insight into the tender finalization process within Candy. Please remember to email your local CCS office if you want to know more about the tender finalization within Candy. We will keep you informed on the next webinar, and remember, if you are unable to join at the selected time, then please still register and you'll receive the recording, which you can then watch in your own time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Until the next webinar, goodbye for now.